The old oak tree in my front yard was shedding its leaves, carpeting the lawn in shades of rust and gold. It was a perfectly ordinary autumn afternoon, the kind that feels quiet and settled, promising a cool evening and a warm cup of tea. I saw my daughter Chloe's modest sedan parked by the curb a little further down the street than usual. A flicker of mischief, a feeling I hadn't indulged in years, sparked within me. She was visiting a neighbor, and I knew she'd be back any minute. I pictured her tired face after a long week, and imagined the startled laugh that would bubble up if her own mother suddenly popped up from the back seat, a harmless prank. A moment of levity to remind her that we weren't just mother and daughter, but friends. I slipped out my front door, my worn gardening shoes making no sound on the grass. The car door was unlocked, a testament to the trust people still had in our sleepy neighborhood. I folded my 68-year-old frame into the cramped space behind the passenger seat, my knees protesting but my spirit giggling. The scent of Chloe's perfume, a light floral scent she'd worn since she was 16, filled the enclosed space. It was the smell of home, of love, of my entire world. How could a place that smelled so much like her ever feel dangerous? Before I dive in, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And if you enjoy stories like this, please like and subscribe. It helps me keep sharing more. I waited, holding my breath, the silence in the car amplifying the thumping of my own heart. It was a childish thrill, this hiding. Soon I heard the crunch of footsteps on the gravel shoulder, then the familiar click of the driver's side door. Chloe slid in with a sigh. But another door opened. A man's frame filled the passenger seat. Liam, her husband. My smile tightened slightly. He was fine. A bit too smooth for my taste, with a salesman's smile that never quite reached his eyes, but he made Chloe happy, or so I thought. Is everything set for tomorrow? Liam's voice was low, stripped of the usual charm he used around me. It was flat, like a stone skipping on dark water. I spoke with Dr. Albright's office, Chloe replied, her voice a strained whisper. It didn't sound like my daughter. It was thin, brittle. They have the file, all the notes I've been taking. He said, with your testimony and the documented episodes, it should be a straightforward assessment. My blood went cold. Episodes? What episodes? I'm as sharp as I've ever been. My mind raced, trying to grasp the context, but the words were alien, clinical. Good, Liam said, a note of finality in his tone. The lawyer said, once the competency hearing is done and we have guardianship, petitioning the court to manage her assets will be a formality. We can have the house on the market by the end of the month. The world tilted. The playful prank, the scent of perfume, the golden afternoon, it all dissolved into a low, terrifying hum in my ears. Guardianship, competency hearing, my house, my home, the one my late husband Arthur and I poured our souls into, the place I raised my daughter, was being discussed like a piece of inventory. Are you sure about this, Liam? Chloe's voice was barely audible, a thread of sound. She trusts me. She trusts us. When she finds out, she won't find out. He cut her off, his voice sharp now, laced with an impatience that terrified me. She'll be in a safe place where people can look after her. We've all seen how forgetful she's getting. We're doing this for her own good, Chloe, and for us. We can't move forward with our lives until this is settled. Forgetful? I'd misplaced my keys last week. I once called my neighbour by her sister's name. These were human moments, not a diagnosis. They weren't episodes. They were ammunition. My own daughter had been collecting them, documenting my life not with love, but as evidence against me. Crouched in the darkness of that car, I wasn't a mother anymore. I was a target. The love that had been the bedrock of my life had just revealed itself to be a lie, a carefully constructed performance designed to strip me of my home, my dignity, my very self. My heart wasn't just breaking. It was being methodically dismantled, piece by piece, by the two people I thought I could trust above all others. And as they drove off, their calm, measured voices planning the end of my life as I knew it, I knew my prank was over, but their game had just begun, and I had to learn the rules before they checked me off their list. I don't remember how long I stayed in that car after they drove off, parked it, and went inside their sterile apartment complex. It could have been 10 minutes or an hour. Time had become a thick, syrupy substance I couldn't move through. Eventually, the cold seeping through the car floor brought me back. I pushed the door open, my limbs stiff and clumsy, and stumbled out into the twilight. The walk home was a blur. Every familiar sight, Mrs. Gable's prize-winning roses, the crack in the sidewalk by the fire hydrant, the welcoming glow of my own porch light looked alien. It was like seeing my life through a distorted lens, everything warped by the poison I'd just ingested. The woman who had left this house an hour ago, full of light and mischief, was gone forever. The one who returned was a stranger to herself, a ghost in her own home. I unlocked the front door, the click of the latch echoing in the unnatural silence. The house smelled of cinnamon and old books, a scent that had always meant comfort. Tonight, it smelled like a trap. My eyes landed on the gallery of photos lining the hallway wall. There was Chloe at her 5th birthday party, face smeared with chocolate cake. Chloe at her high school graduation, beaming with pride, her arm around me. Chloe on her wedding day, looking at Liam with a starry-eyed adoration that now made my stomach clench with nausea. Had it all been a lie? Was the daughter in those pictures a phantom, a character she played while the real Chloe was taking notes, waiting for me to become a burden she could discard? What would you have done if you found out your own child was cataloguing your every mistake? My gaze settled on a photo of Arthur and me, taken the day we bought this house. We were so young, so full of hope. We had poured our dreams into these walls. Arthur had laid the hardwood floors himself, his hands raw and calloused. I had planted the garden, tending to each flower like it was a child. This house wasn't just wood and nails. It was a living archive of our love, our struggles, our family. And they were planning to sell it, to liquidate my memories for a down payment on their future. I walked into my small office, a room where I paid my bills and wrote letters. My hands trembled as I opened the drawer of my writing desk. I didn't know what I was looking for, but a primal instinct told me the evidence was here, hiding in plain sight. My fingers brushed against a small leather-bound notebook tucked beneath a stack of stationery. It wasn't mine. I knew every object in this house, and this was foreign. With a sense of sickening dread, I opened it. It was Chloe's elegant, looping handwriting, the same script from countless birthday cards and thank you notes. But these words were not loving. They were cold, detached observations. May 12th. Mom forgot her dental appointment. Had to call and reschedule for her. June 3rd. Told me the same story about Dad twice in one afternoon. Seemed confused when I pointed it out. June 21st. Left the stove on after making tea. I caught it when I stopped by. Very dangerous. My breath hitched. The forgotten appointment I'd had a migraine that day. The repeated story I was emotional, talking about my anniversary. The stove I had turned it down to simmer and simply forgotten to turn it completely off, a mistake anyone could make. But here, in this cruel little book, my life was reframed as a collection of symptoms. Each entry was a nail being hammered into my coffin. They weren't just planning this. They had been building their case for months. My daughter, my sweet Chloe, had been visiting me not out of love, but as a spy, a data collector for the prosecution. She would smile, hug me, drink my tea, and then leave to document another piece of evidence for my undoing. The betrayal was deeper than I could have ever imagined. It wasn't a sudden impulse. It was a calculated, long-term project. The shock I felt in the car curdled into something colder, harder. It was the chilling realization that the person I was fighting wasn't a stranger. She wore my daughter's face. She had my daughter's voice. And she held the pen that was writing the end of my story. As I stood there, clutching that damning little book, a new feeling began to bloom in the wreckage of my heart. Determination. They thought I was a fragile old woman slipping into senility. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The night was long and silent, a hollow space filled only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. Sleep was an impossible luxury. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their whispers in the car, a venomous loop playing over and over. I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, the ritual familiar, but the comfort absent. The warm ceramic felt foreign in my hands, as if it belonged to someone else. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd helped a 5-year-old Chloe with her finger painting, her small hands covered in blue and green. I remembered the fierce protective love I felt for her then. A love so powerful I thought it could shield her from any harm. I never imagined the harm would one day be directed at me, from her. That memory, once a source of warmth, now felt like a shard of ice in my chest. How does a mother reconcile the child she raised with the adult who betrays her? The quiet dread was a physical presence in the room, a cold fog that settled deep in my bones. It wasn't the sharp panic of an immediate threat, but the slow creeping horror of a reality that has been fundamentally broken. My home was no longer a sanctuary. My daughter was no longer my ally. I was utterly alone. I ran my fingers over the worn wood of the tabletop, tracing the faint scratches left by decades of homework, family dinners, and hurried breakfasts. Arthur had always said this table was the heart of the house. Now I felt its heartbeat faltering. I thought about their plan. A safe place. A sterile room in a facility filled with strangers, where my days would be managed by a schedule, my memories fading under the fluorescent lights, while my home was sold to the highest bidder. They would visit on holidays, bringing flowers and feigned concern, telling themselves they had done the right thing. The thought of it, the sheer patronizing cruelty, ignited a spark in the cold fog of my dread. I would not let that happen. I would not be erased. They underestimated me. They saw a quiet, aging widow. They didn't see the woman who had nursed a husband through his final illness, who had managed a household on a shoestring budget, who had faced down grief and poverty and never once broken. I would not break now. My strategy couldn't be one of open warfare. A direct confrontation would only confirm their narrative. They'd twist my anger into hysteria, my defense into paranoia. No, I had to be smarter. I had to play their game, but by my rules. I would become the woman they wanted to see. Gentle, a little scattered, utterly harmless. I would let them walk deeper into their own trap, all while I gathered my own evidence, my own ammunition. My heart ached with the grief of it, the necessity of performing for my own child. But the survival instinct is a powerful primal thing. The next morning, as the sun cast long shadows across the kitchen floor, I felt a shift inside me. The weeping widow was gone. In her place was a quiet strategist, a woman fighting not just for her house, but for her name, her history, her very identity. The sound of the doorbell shattered the morning silence. My heart leaped into my throat. I wasn't ready. I hadn't prepared my face, my voice. I peeked through the curtain. It was Chloe, holding a bag of groceries, a bright, false smile plastered on her face. She was here for another observation, another entry in her little black book. I took a deep breath, smoothed my apron, and walked to the door, a serene, unsuspecting smile on my own face. The performance of my life was about to betray. "Mom, I was just in the neighborhood and thought I'd bring you some things. You were running low on milk yesterday." Chloe's voice was a cascade of forced cheerfulness as she bustled into the kitchen, placing the grocery bag on the counter. The sound grated on my nerves, each bright note a lie. I watched her move around my kitchen, a space she knew as well as her own, and saw a stranger. "Oh, Chloe, that's so thoughtful of you, dear," I said, my voice carefully pitched to sound warm, perhaps a little frail. My memory isn't what it used to be. I would have completely forgotten. I saw a flicker of something in her eyes' satisfaction, maybe pity before she masked it. It was a small victory, but it confirmed my strategy. She was here to see a decline. and I would give her one. We sat at the kitchen table with cups of tea, the silence between us thick with unspoken words. This used to be our time, a comfortable ritual of shared stories and easy laughter. Now it was an interrogation disguised as a visit. I decided to probe gently. "You know," I began, stirring my tea, "I was looking at your baby photos last night. Do you remember that little yellow dress with the ducks on it you loved so much? You refused to wear anything else for a solid year." I watched her face closely. A genuine memory should spark a light in her eyes. But she just offered a vague, tight-lipped smile. "Honestly, Mom, I don't really remember. That was so long ago. It was a small thing, but it was wrong. That yellow dress was legendary in our family, the subject of dozens of stories." Her deflecting felt like another betrayal, an erasure of the shared history I clung to. She was distancing herself not just from me, but from the child she used to be, the child who loved me without condition. Her phone buzzed, and she glanced at it, a shadow of anxiety crossing her face before she quickly tucked it away. Liam, no doubt, the puppet master, checking on his marionette. The visit ended as it began, with a hug that felt hollow and promises to call that I knew were part of the script. After she left, a profound wave of grief washed over me. This was my daughter. How could I maintain this charade, this cold war in my own home? I walked back into the kitchen to put away the groceries she'd brought. As I lifted the carton of milk, something fell out of the side pocket of the paper bag. It was a folded piece of paper, an official-looking document she must have hastily stuffed in there. My hands trembled as I unfolded it. It was a final notice, printed in stark red ink. The name on the letterhead was Titan Lending Solutions. The amount due was staggering, $75,000. The payment was 30 days overdue, and the letter spoke of asset seizure and legal action. The loan was in Liam's name, but Chloe was listed as the co-signer, $75,000. It was an impossible sum. Liam worked in sales, and Chloe was a part-time graphic designer. They lived comfortably, but not extravagantly. Where had this debt come from? And what had they spent it on? Suddenly, the pieces began to shift. This wasn't just about simple greed, a desire for a bigger house or a fancier life. This was about desperation. They weren't just trying to build a future. They were trying to escape a catastrophic present. The plan to take my house wasn't aspirational. It was a frantic, last-ditch effort to stop a financial avalanche from burying them. The knowledge didn't lessen the sting of the betrayal, not at all. But it changed the color of it. It painted their cruelty with a shade of raw panic. This secret, this crushing debt, was the engine driving everything. It was the reason my daughter was willing to sacrifice her own mother. As I stood there, holding that threatening letter, I realized the game was more dangerous than I thought. They weren't just dealing with lawyers and doctors. They were entangled with a company that called itself Titan Lending. It sounded predatory. The kind of place that didn't just break your bank account, but maybe your legs too. My fight was no longer just against my own family. I was now facing an unknown, unseen enemy, the one holding the leash that was choking the life out of my daughter. The discovery of the loan notice changed everything. The quiet, defensive war I had planned to wage was no longer enough. This wasn't a slow-moving legal battle. It was a crisis hurtling toward a violent conclusion. I had to understand the enemy. For 2 days, I did nothing but research. I learned that Titan Lending Solutions was a high-interest, short-term lender, one of those legal loan sharks that prey on the desperate. Their reviews were a horror story of threats, harassment, and impossible terms. Liam hadn't just taken out a loan, he had made a deal with the devil. But why? I needed to see the man himself, away from Chloe's moderating influence. I needed to see what he was really made of. The next afternoon, I followed him. It felt sordid, like something from a cheap detective novel, but I pushed the feeling down. I drove my old, unassuming Buick, staying several car lengths behind his sleek, leased sedan. He didn't go to work. Instead, he drove to a rundown industrial park on the edge of town. He parked and walked into a dingy auto body shop, the kind with blacked-out windows and no visible customers. I parked across the street, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. What would you do if you saw your family member walking into a place like that? A few minutes later, a large, powerfully built man with a shaved head and a scowl etched onto his face came out to meet him. Their conversation was tense. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the body language. Liam was pleading, his hands outstretched. The other man was unmoved, jabbing a finger into Liam's chest. At one point, he grabbed Liam by the collar, shaking him like a rag doll. Liam's face was pale with terror. This wasn't a business meeting. This was a man being threatened. After a terrifying few minutes, the man shoved Liam away and Liam scrambled back to his car and sped off. The cold certainty settled in my gut. This was about more than money. This was about fear. That evening, I went to their apartment. I didn't call first. I brought a casserole, the perfect disguise for a concerned mother. When Chloe opened the door, her face was drawn and pale. Liam wasn't there. "Mom, what a surprise," she said, her voice thin. "Come in." I walked into their immaculate, joyless apartment. I put the casserole on the counter and turned to face her. I didn't raise my voice. I simply held out the folded loan notice. "I believe this is yours," I said quietly. The color drained from her face. She looked at the paper as if it were a venomous snake. For a moment, she tried to bluff. I don't know what that is. Don't, Chloe," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "Don't lie to me. Not anymore. I know about the debt. I know about everything." Her carefully constructed composure shattered. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, ragged sound of pure despair. She collapsed onto a kitchen chair, her face in her hands, her body shaking with guilt and fear. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she wept. "I'm so sorry." She told me everything. It poured out of her in a broken, jumbled torrent. Liam's gambling addiction, the small loans that spiraled into massive ones, The lies he told, the secret accounts, the constant threats from the lenders. He had convinced her that my house was their only way out, the only thing that could save them. He'd told her they would put me in a nice facility, a place with gardens and activities, and that it was for my own good anyway. He twisted her love for me into a weapon, using her fear for his safety to justify the ultimate betrayal of mine. He said they would hurt him. "Mom," she cried, her voice muffled by her hands. "He said they knew where I worked, where you lived. I was so scared. I didn't know what to do." Her betrayal was still a knife in my heart, but now I saw the hand that had been forcing the blade. She wasn't a cold-hearted monster. She was a victim, trapped in a web of fear and manipulation, too terrified to see a way out. My anger toward her softened, replaced by a fierce protective instinct. Just then, the key turned in the lock. The front door swung open and Liam walked in. He stopped dead when he saw me. Then his eyes darted to the loan notice on the table and finally to Chloe's tear-streaked face. The mask of charm fell away completely. His face hardened into something ugly and cold. "What have you done?" he hissed at Chloe, his voice low and menacing. "Liam, she knows," Chloe whispered, shrinking back. He took a step toward her, his fists clenched. "You weak, stupid." I stepped between them, my small frame suddenly feeling as solid as granite. "You will not speak to my daughter that way," I said, my voice shaking but clear. He turned his glare on me. It was like looking into the eyes of a wolf. "You?" he spat. "You have no idea what you've just done. You've ruined everything." He took another step forward, backing me toward the counter. The air crackled with a violence that was terrifyingly real. For the first time, I felt a primal physical fear. I had uncovered the betrayal, but in doing so, I had cornered a desperate, dangerous animal. And we were locked in the room with him. "You think you're so clever, don't you?" Liam sneered, his voice a low growl. He was advancing on me, his posture radiating a predatory energy that sucked all the air from the room, playing the poor, confused old woman, all while you were snooping. "I know what you are, Liam," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. I refused to let him see my fear. A cornered animal respects strength, not weakness. Chloe was sobbing behind me, a choked, helpless sound. "You're a gambler and a coward. You've been lying to my daughter since the day you met her, running up debts and convincing her that destroying my life was the only way to save yours." His face twisted into a grotesque mask of rage. She was happy to go along with it when she thought it meant a new house and a life without her needy mother hanging around her neck. "That's not true," Chloe cried out, finding a sliver of courage. "I love my mother." "Love?" Liam laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. "You don't know the first thing about it. You just do what you're told. You were taking notes on your own mother like she was a lab rat because I told you to. You were ready to sign her away." The truth of his words, the way he wielded her complicity like a club, struck Chloe silent. He was right. She had been a participant. The shock of his cruelty was finally breaking the spell he'd had over her. I saw the shift in her eyes, the dawning horror of her own actions. The true twist wasn't just his debt, it was the depth of his malice. He wasn't just a man in trouble. He was a sociopath who enjoyed the power, the manipulation, the slow destruction of the people closest to him. Subscribe so you're not caught off guard by the people who are supposed to protect you. Liam took another step, grabbing my arm. His grip was like iron. "Now you're going to fix this," he hissed, his face inches from mine. "You're going to go to the bank tomorrow, take out a second mortgage, and give me the money. And Chloe's going to watch you do it." "Never," I said, my voice ringing with defiance. His grip tightened, and I flinched in pain. That's when we heard it. A loud, authoritative knock on the apartment door. Liam froze. His eyes widened in panic, darting toward the door like a trapped animal. "Who is that?" he whispered frantically. The knocking came again, harder this time. "Police, open up!" a voice boomed from the hallway. Liam let go of my arm as if he'd been burned. He looked wildly around the room, searching for an escape that didn't exist. Chloe and I just stared, stunned. I hadn't called them. Who had? The door shook as the police used a key from the building manager. 2 uniformed officers entered the apartment, their presence immediately changing the entire dynamic of the room. Their eyes took in the scene. Liam, pale and sweating. Chloe, tear-streaked and terrified. Me, standing protectively in front of her. We received a call from a neighbour about a disturbance, the older officer said, his gaze settling on Liam. Loud shouting. Sounded like a woman in distress. My neighbour, old Mr. Henderson from 3B, a retired librarian who spent most of his days reading by his window. He had heard, he had acted, he had saved us. "Everything is fine, officer," Liam said, trying to summon his salesman's charm, but his voice cracked. "Just a small family disagreement." "Ma'am?" The officer addressed me directly, his eyes kind but serious. "Are you all right? Is this man threatening you?" I looked at my daughter, who gave me a small, desperate nod. It was time. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "He is. He has been threatening both of us. He's in a great deal of trouble, and he was trying to force me to give him money." The officers shared a look. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to come with us," the older one said to Liam. "No, wait, you don't understand," Liam protested, his composure finally shattering. "She's confused. She's an old woman. She gets things mixed up." It was his last desperate play, using the very lie he had constructed against me. But it was too late. The officers had seen the truth in the room. His aggression, our fear. As they led us shouting, protesting Liam out of the apartment, a profound silence fell. It was over. The immediate danger was gone. Chloe and I were left standing in the wreckage of our lives, the ugly truth of everything laid bare between us. The police had walked in, but the real storm was just beginning. The sound of the police car pulling away was the loudest silence I had ever heard. The apartment, which moments before had been a pressure cooker of rage and fear, was now a vacuum. Chloe stood frozen in the middle of the living room, her arms wrapped around herself as if to hold her splintering world together. She wouldn't look at me. The shame radiating from her was a palpable heat. I walked over and gently guided her to the sofa. She sank into it, her body limp, and finally, the dam of her composure broke entirely. She began to sob, not with the panicked fear of before, but with the deep, soul-crushing grief of someone who has to face the consequences of their own choices. "I'm sorry," she whispered over and over again, the words lost in her tears. "Mom, I am so sorry." I sat beside her, not touching her yet, giving her the space for her guilt. My own emotions were a tangled mess. There was relief, yes, but also a profound sadness for the daughter I had raised, the bright, compassionate girl who had somehow gotten lost in this man's darkness. I thought back to a time when she was 7. She had fallen off her bike and scraped her knee badly. I remembered cleaning the wound, her small body trembling with pain and fear. I held her and told her it would heal, that the scar would fade. I felt that same instinct now. She was wounded not just by Liam, but by her own actions. But this was a wound so deep, I didn't know if it could ever truly heal. How do you come back from a betrayal like this? We spent hours with the police, giving our statements. Chloe, to her credit, told them everything. She confessed to the plan, the notebook, the doctor's appointments. She laid her own guilt bare, not making a single excuse. She was taking the first painful steps toward accountability. When we finally returned to the apartment in the early hours of the morning, it felt tainted, every surface coated with the residue of Liam's presence. "You can't stay here," I said softly. She just nodded, too exhausted to speak. We drove back to my house, the house she had planned to take from me. As we walked through the front door, the irony was a bitter taste in my mouth. She was seeking sanctuary in the very place she had sought to desecrate. For the next few days, we moved around each other like ghosts, the space between us charged with everything that had happened. The quiet dread was gone, replaced by a heavy, suffocating regret. Chloe barely ate, barely slept. She was drowning in the enormity of what she had done. One evening, as we sat in silence in the living room, she finally spoke. "The final papers," she said, her voice a hollow whisper. "The ones for the lawyer, for the hearing. They were in my bag. I was going to drop them off tomorrow." My breath caught in my throat. I had known it was close, but hearing it confirmed that I was just one day away from facing a legal battle for my own mind was a chilling blow. She had been that close. Despite her fear, despite her doubts, she had been prepared to take that final, irreversible step. The betrayal, which had begun to feel like something Liam had orchestrated, suddenly became hers again. She had made a choice. She had chosen him over me right up until the very last moment. The path to forgiveness, which had seemed difficult but possible, suddenly looked like a vast, impassable chasm. She saw the change in my expression, the fresh wave of pain. "I know," she said, fresh tears welling in her eyes. "There's nothing I can say. I would have done it, and I have to live with that for the rest of my life." Her raw, honest confession was both the most painful thing I had ever heard and the first sign of real hope. She wasn't just sorry she got caught. She was horrified by who she had become. The healing, if it was to happen at all, would have to start there, in that ugly, unbearable truth. The weeks that followed were a slow, arduous process of untangling the wreckage Liam had left behind. Chloe, with my quiet support, began the daunting task of rebuilding. She hired a lawyer to deal with the fraudulent debts Liam had put in her name. She started therapy to understand how she had allowed herself to be so completely manipulated. She moved her few belongings out of the apartment and into my guest room, her presence in the house a constant, fragile reminder of both our deep wound and our tentative attempt to heal it. There were days of crushing silence and days of tearful, difficult conversations. We talked about her father, about her childhood, about the deep-seated fear of failure that Liam had so expertly exploited. We laid our family's history bare, searching for the cracks where his poison had seeped in. The legal proceedings against Liam were swift. Faced with charges of fraud, coercion, and domestic threats, he took a plea bargain. He was sentenced to several years in prison. There was no victory in it, only a grim sense of closure. The problem of the debt, however, remained. Even with the fraudulent loans being contested, there were legitimate debts Chloe had co-signed. The amount was still overwhelming. We sat at the kitchen table one morning, a pile of bills between us, and faced the inevitable. "We have to sell the house," I said. It wasn't a question. Chloe looked at me, her eyes filled with a grief that mirrored my own. "Mom, no. After everything, this is your home. We'll find another way. There is no other way, my love." I told her, my voice gentle. "This house is just wood and nails. It holds our memories, but it doesn't own them. We take them with us." And so we began to pack. Boxing up 68 years of a life was a bittersweet archaeology. Every object held a story. Chloe's first pair of shoes, Arthur's favorite armchair, the chipped teapot we'd used for thousands of cups of tea. We cried over photo albums and laughed at faded report cards. We weren't just packing boxes. We were sifting through our shared past, carefully choosing what to keep and what to let go of. We were healing, one memory at a time. The day the moving truck came was bright and clear. As the last box was loaded, Chloe and I stood on the empty porch, looking at the house that had been the backdrop to our entire lives. The sale would clear all the debts and leave enough for us to start over, somewhere smaller, somewhere new. It was a monumental loss, but it felt like a necessary sacrifice. We had lost the house, but in doing so, we were saving each other. I thought back to that autumn afternoon, to the foolish, light-hearted prank that had started this entire nightmare. I had hidden in my daughter's car to surprise her, but I ended up discovering a dark secret that allowed me to save her and, in a strange way, to save myself. I had been living in the past, in the comfortable memories held by these walls. Now, I was being forced to look toward the future. Chloe reached out and took my hand. Her grip was firm, no longer the hand of a frightened victim, but of a woman who had walked through fire and was ready to see what was on the other side. "Thank you, Mom," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "for not giving up on me." "Never," I whispered. My journey taught me that the greatest betrayals often grow from the deepest wounds, and that true family isn't about blood or a shared roof, but about the hard, painful, beautiful choice to forgive and rebuild. Sometimes you have to lose your home to find your way back to each other. We may not know where we're going next, but for the first time in a long time, we were going there together. The real foundation was never the house. It was us. The most important lesson I've learned is that strength isn't about weathering the storm perfectly, but about having the courage to rebuild after it passes. We've all faced betrayals that shake us to our core, but it's in the quiet moments of choosing forgiveness that we find our true power. If you're still not subscribing, drop a comment what's holding you back from joining our community of survivors. For everyone else, thank you for being a part of this journey. Your support means the world.